Y-axis, I have all my parts set out here. Got our limit switch with the pigtail, my Y-axis bracket, the backing piece, my self-threading screws, my 540 screws, and then for the trip dog, the eccentric, I have the eccentric, the spacer, and the 1032. So first we're going to mount the bracket on there. In a previous video, we showed you how to drill and tap these holes. If you buy a machine from us, this will already be assembled on it. So this video is covering everything from scratch. Okay, the two 540 socket head cap screws. These are the two holes that we drilled and tapped previously. And all we're going to do is get one of them started and get the other one started. So you can see how it mounts here. We're actually going to put the limit switch on this first. But so you can see where it goes, we'll do this first. So that's how this mounts up. If it's sitting a little bit cockeyed, you have some wiggle room here. You actually have quite a bit of play. Because the backing plate is on the inside, we're going to put the limit switch on this first, and then we're going to mount it on here. First, we're going to take the limit switch, and it's going to be mounted like so. These are Phillips head screws. We'll put it through. You got the slot. You just put it through the slot, and we'll get one of these started. I suggest that these are self-threading screws. I suggest that before you try to put the backing on there, you take each of these screws and you put it into the aluminum, and then you get it started. That way the thread's already in there, you're not doing it when you're trying to assemble it. So do that for both holes, get them both started with a thread. And all you do is put the screw in there and then just start turning it. And there will be some resistance because you're threading the hole with the screw. And once it goes through, there's a thread in these parts and they're good to go. I'm going to put this on the back, let the screw get in there and get started, and put the second screw in and get that started. These guys, because you're going to have to adjust it, we just leave these two guys loose, so they're loose on there. Alright, then I want the wire to go between the bracket and the base, so that's where the wire is going to go through. So now I'll put the 540 screws in here, and we'll mount this guy up. And I'm going to get it square. That's square. That looks good. And then I'll lock down the other one. They just need to be good and snug. You don't have to go outrageous with the torque. Make sure your wire's not pinched. It's fitting free in there, so that all looks good. Alright, now we have our eccentric trigger and the spacer and the 1032. And this goes together with the eccentric on the outside, the spacer, and then there's two holes right here. Turn this a little bit more. Two holes right here that have set screws in them. One's for the oiler, one's for your gib lock, and then we have this third hole right here, and that's where your eccentric trigger is going to go. Put it in there like so, okay, and just leave it snug so you can turn it. Not too snug, but just enough so you can play around with it. Now, what we're going to do is bring our table back. You're not going to be able to go against a hard stop because you've got a cover on here. So you're going to bring it back about as far as it can go, compressing the cover, and then move out some. Because if you go all the way back to where it's fully compressed, once you start getting chips in here, you're going to turn this into a chip compactor. And then what will happen is whenever you go to your home position, it's going to start, the stepper motor is going to start missing steps, and you're going to be in trouble. Right there is about as far back as I would want to go, and we're going to go about 4 turns out. This is the position that I want my Y-axis to trip the limit switch. So it's a combination of my eccentric and my limit switch. So right now, if we go to the setup page on our controller, you'll see that it's got the administrative password is on right now. If I click on that and then I click down here, double click and double click, it gets rid of that. Now, if I push down on my, oh, sorry, forgot one step. Okay, first we have to hook up our limit switch. So this is my Y-axis, and this is my Y-axis limit switch cable. So I'm going to hook this guy up. And again, it only goes in one way. All right, now with it hooked up, you can see where my high-low just went to low. And as soon as I trip it, it goes to high. And when it trips, you can hear it click. So when these are hooked up and they're in the open position, they'll all be reading low like this one is right here, Y-axis home or Y-axis sensor input. Then when you trip it with the eccentric, when it pushes it down, it will go to high. And this is also set up this way so that if there's any problems of disconnection here, it will automatically go to high and your machine will give you an alarm. For right now, we have a slot that's in the bracket, so we can move this way. We can move the optical encode, or the sensor rather, the limit switch forward and back a bit. Once you've got everything, your bracket tight and your limit switch is loose in here, if it's loose, you should be able to move it back and forth in the slot to adjust it, okay? If you're having trouble loosening it, then most likely you've pinched your wire. So make sure it moves freely when you back off the screws. On your eccentric, what you want to do is, if you loosen this up, you can see that's all the way down. And then as I roll it this way, it gets further away. You want to go about halfway. Just snug it there. Then move your limit switch to a position where you can hear it. Okay, it's got to be a little bit more. Move it down a little bit more. Right there, it's clicking. All right, so what I want to do is move it to the point where it's engaged. All right, and now I'm going to snug up one of the screws. That's snugged up, and you can see on the screen that you're at high right now. What I'm going to do, back off right there, it goes to low. Right there's high, and that's pretty much where we want it. If you want to adjust it a little bit more, then I would do the adjustments with your eccentric. So right now I'm going to lock the limit switch in place. This, snug on that guy, snug there. Off, on. Okay, the other thing as far as the amount of room that's left here, this is actually going to go past the roller a little bit and then back out a couple turns, a turn and a half. So you have to have enough space in here to allow it to go past the roller once it hits it and then roll out. So right there's the roll out. Well, I actually like where that is right there. So I'm going to lock the 1032 screw for my eccentric in place, and And that guy is now set. And again, right there's click on, click off. So that looks good. The next one we're going to do is the Z-axis. The Z-axis limit switch bracket actually mounts right on the stepper motor. So you just remove the two 832 screws, and then this guy goes in place, and you put the 832 screws back in there. For this one, the limit switch is actually going to be mounted to the inside. We're going to put it pretty much in place first. Go from there. We have our two self-threading screws. I already threaded the backing plate before we did this, so we have an easy assembly. Now I'm just going to guess on this one for now. We have the slot. If I go to the end of the slot, I'm going to back off just a little bit. I'm going to guess right about there. Oh, hold on, I got it the wrong way. I want it mounted like so, this way, on the back side. So up against the end of the groove and back just a hair as a guess, and we'll just put them in snug. So that's your relationship right there. That looks good. Then we get the two 832 screws. We put this in place up top and put the 832s in. One, two. And you can snug these guys down. That's not going to change. Now for the eccentric, we have a drill and tap hole right here on your column saddle, and this eccentric has got a hole for an 832. The eccentric we put down here was a 1032, a little bit larger. So make sure you get the correct one, smaller hole for the 832. And we will put him in place and just leave him loose for right now. Same thing with this, with your Z-axis as with the Y-axis. Okay, you want to bring it all the way up until it gets to the end of travel, and then bring it down a couple turns. So I'm down considerably lower than I want to be with my limit switch. So this guy here, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 turns. And that's where I want it to hit. Okay. And I don't have any rub between, there is clearance between the saddle and the limit switch. If you do have some rub, just bend the bracket a hair and you'll be fine. Alright, so for this one I have to raise my limit switch up quite a bit. So take this off again, measure an eyeball, let's see, I'm going to move it up about 1/4 inch. I'm going to loosen this and shift it up 1/4 inch. And And I feel pretty good about this. I'm going to snug them up pretty good. So now we have our eccentric, and you can hear it click right there. So we have our Z-axis. Plug this guy in. Right now the Z-axis is showing low. When we actually trip it, it goes to high. So you see right there. And we will just tighten up our 832 right there. Okay, now, oh, hold on. Okay, so that's off. That's on. Okay, and I actually want it up a little higher than that. We're going to take it off again. I was off by a little bit. Right there's a trip, and that's too close, so I can adjust that with the eccentric. Right there. Alright, so for the eccentric, okay, so right there's where I wanted the trip. Right there's trip. Off. Right there. Off. On. Alright. That guy's looking good right there. So he's homed out. The next one is the X-axis, which is the easiest one. So we'll spin her around here. Okay, we're going to do the X-axis. This is the easiest one. First we're going to put the 1032 screw into the mill saddle. There's most likely a set screw in this hole. When you do retrofit or just set this up the first time, you just take the set screw out and you put your 1032 by 3/8 screw into that hole. Just thread it in all the way, lock it down. So that's a stop that your limit switch is going to press up against. Then we have our mount that goes onto the adapter right here. You have to put the two 540 screws in to mount this first, because after you put the limit switch on top of this, it's going to cover over the bottom hole. So these are your two 540 screws. And just stick them both into the holes first, line them up, get one started, and then get the other one started. That one started, top one started, and bottom one's going. And push it into place, and just snug them both down. These guys are in place. Tighten them up. Then we take our limit switch. The limit switch is going to be mounted like so, with the ball down. We have our two 256 machine screws, flathead machine screws. And you just need a Phillips head screwdriver, and we'll get the top one in first. And then the bottom one will get started. And the nice thing about the X is this lines up with the stop screw without doing much adjustment whatsoever. Once they're in there, just snug them down. The body of the limit switch is plastic, so don't over tighten it, just make them snug. Once that's done, then we're going to plug in our connector, and it only goes in one way. And we're going to leave the stepper motor unplugged for right now. And now we're going to move it in, and we'll see the X-axis. It starts off in low, and then when we make contact and it engages the limit switch, you'll hear it click. You'll hear the limit switch click, and then it should go to high, which you just did right there. So that's where it's connecting right there. That's where it's engaging limit switch, and that all looks good. And we'll make sure that the driver box is off, and we'll hook the stepper motor up. Okay, so now we have power to the stepper motor. Once we have this guy lined up, you want to take your limit switch wire that's underneath the stepper motor and bring it over here and zip tie it to the cable coming out of the stepper motor. Right there, looks good. Then we cut off the end. And cut it off right at the nut. There we go. And that guy's set. Now we turn on the driver box again. All three of the axes are energized. All three stepper motors are energized. Now if we go to the control, and we'll go back to the program MDI page, and we'll go Control Alt Home. Z-axis homes out, Y-axis homes out, X-axis homes out. Okay, everything just homed out fine. It homes out Z, Y, and then X. So we're good to go. It looks good.